Is Samuel Höller from the association TipTap. I am the host for today. I'm also head of the association. We have been advocating for the consumption of tap water for over 10 years and against plastic waste. So our topic today is climate change and its effect on cities and water bodies in the cities. What we can witness is that there are extreme weather events like droughts and floodings and so much more. So cities are not only affected by climate change, but they're also the driver of climate change and water stress. They are reaching their limits. So maybe you've heard about Cape Town 2018. They had almost reached day zero in 2018. So when we take a look at the cities, it's really important to talk about water and sanitation in the light of climate change, but also in the light of the current pandemic. We see that the problems exacerbate. We are told to wash our hands and to stay clean, but this is not possible without a proper sanitation. And it's not only in Germany, but also in other countries of Europe that we face these challenges. We have to make sure that there's enough water and sanitation for everyone. And we have to organize to advocate for this. So there are a lot of questions that we want to discuss today. And our focus today is on cities, because as I already said, they are affected the most by climate change, but in cities, we can also create a lot of new ideas and solutions for this topic. We invited 3 experts that want to give us an input on their perspectives. We have Dr. Singh, who wants to talk about the global perspective of water stress. He also focuses on human rights. We have Ms. Hecht, who represents the blue communities. She will explain what blue communities are and how they work. And then we have Mr. Giga, who is from the public utility Emscher Genossenschaft, and tell us about the activities and projects of his utility. And we want to start with Dr. Rajendra Singh. He is a water conservator. He is also called the Waterman of India. And he wants to talk about the global perspective of the right to water and human rights. Mr. Singh, the floor is yours. Feel free to share a presentation if you have one, and I'm looking forward to your presentation. Hi, we can hear you, Dr. Singh. Feel free to... Yeah, you can start. Okay, Mr. Singh, because the internet connection seems to be very low, I want to start with the two other speakers and continue with Ms. Hecht's contribution. I'm very sorry, Mr. Singh. Let's try later if your connection is better. Okay, so Mr. Singh, we will talk to Ms. Christa Hecht first. She's an expert and also volunteer coordinator of the Blue Community Movement in Germany. She's talking about the international concept of blue communities. And yeah, Ms. Hecht, feel free to start your presentation. Okay, so Ms. Hecht, we can't see your presentation. We see your screen, your computer screen. Okay, perfect. So it seems like the PowerPoint presentation is working. So let's start with Ms. Hecht's contribution. And after this presentation, we will get back to Mr. Singh and talk to Mr. Singh. Okay, so you should be able to hear me. So as he already mentioned, I am the volunteer coordinator of the Blue Community Movement in Germany, and I want to talk about how the Blue communities work and were founded. So 2011, the first Blue community was founded by the Council of Canadians. However, we already started working on Blue communities in 2009. So back then, water was still not considered a human right. The right to water was still not considered a human right. There were the first communities in Switzerland, Bern, but also Amsterdam and Paris, Madrid, Barcelona, Thessaloniki. So there were a lot of cities who were already elaborating this concept of the blue community. So what is a blue community? Blue communities are grassroots movements. And the background is that different municipalities commit themselves to implement certain measures. We're talking about 4 principles. The first principle is recognize water and sanitation as a human right. So it's not about repeating the resolution of the United Nations. It's about the local level and the municipal level. And it's about a community and a municipality really commit to this resolution and commit to making this resolution more popular and implement concrete measures to put the resolution into effect. So after the United Nations issued this resolution, it is now more important than ever to really put these measures into reality. The second principle of the Blue Community is that water services have to remain in the public hand. They have to be administered publicly. So what does that mean? It means that water services have to be managed by the different municipalities and not by private companies. And this has to stay this way in the future. In Germany, we have the following case. Wastewater disposal, for example, is a good example. And 98% of all wastewater operators are public. And it's really important that the majority of these operators are also public operators. So we're talking about independent companies, but also urban public utilities. However, the idea behind this is that you're close to the citizens and that you create awareness on sanitation, on wastewater disposal, and also on the protection of water bodies on a local level. The third principle is that we promote the idea of drinking tap water instead of bottled water. So blue communities commit themselves to implement this goal. That means that when blue communities organize events of all types, they always try to use tap water instead of offering bottled water. So the consequence is that it will create more awareness on the use of tap water. And I want to ask you to try it out once. Try drinking tap water. The water that comes out of the tap always has a really pleasant temperature, around 8 degrees. It's really, really nice to drink, and it also has a positive effect on the environment. And the last effect that is really popular right now is that drinking tap water will create less plastic waste. So you don't have to transport tap water over long distances. This is also good for the environment. And the fourth principle is the cooperation between public companies on an international level. What does that mean? That means that the Blue Community commits to collaborate with other public utilities, and it also commits to work together to spread this idea globally. So we support the implementation of the human right to water on a global level by working together with international colleagues and companies. It is also about exchanging knowledge and experiences with our partners. And we are also committed to the idea of, or let's say, we don't want really expensive machines to be built in cities or countries that don't have a good access to water right now. We rather want to work on a community level and spread the idea of using tap water. So these are a couple of pictures of different blue communities in Germany. We have the city of Marburg, who has decided to become a blue community. We have Munich and Berlin. And the fourth blue community in Germany is Augsburg. That's a really good fit because Augsburg is also World Heritage with its water management. And last but not least, Kempten, the oldest city in Germany, is also a blue community right now. So Hamburg has also decided that it wants to become a blue community, and there are even more cities who are discussing whether they want to become a blue community or not. However, activities in this field have decreased a little bit because right now, of course, the biggest concern is tackling the COVID-19 pandemic. There are different initiatives in these blue communities. And it was always really important to me to really make clear that blue community is not just a label that you use for yourself or for your organization, but it's really about implementing concrete measures with this title. So in Berlin, the blue community is a really large community. They advocate for the ideas that stand behind blue community also in the Senate, because it's really important. In Marburg, for example, we have a drinking well navigator, and we also have panels and roundtables on a regular basis to talk about further actions. In Munich, for example, even before they became a blue community, there were 1,500 drinking water wells and dispensers in the city. And in the city of Kempten, we also had a campaign in order to advocate for blue communities and their goals. So on this slide, you can see a couple of initiatives. A TipTap is also a stakeholder who is really committed to spreading the idea of the blue communities. Our host Samuel is the head of a TipTap. So I want to invite you to take a look at their website. The Weltfriedensdienst also has a website. And we also have online events that are organized by many other initiatives. If you want to have more information about blue communities, you can also take a look at our own website, Blue Community, which is the last link here on my presentation. So yeah, that's it so far. Thank you. I have 3 questions. So 2 questions are mine and one was posted in the chat. It's okay to share your presentation, right? Okay, perfect. So the second question is, there are many communities, blue communities in Germany, and many other cities who plan on becoming blue communities. So can you tell us more about that? Yeah, in Hessen, in the federal state of Hessen, there is another city who has already done a lot of, or implemented a lot of actions. And they also have a school that really creates a lot of actions. And in the city of Freiburg, I know that they also discuss whether or not to become a blue community. However, I don't want to talk too much about it as it's not a fixed decision yet. Don't want to create expectations. Do you know the Ökozid-Bewegung, the Ökozid movement? Is there a cooperation? Are you planning on cooperating with them? I don't know. Okay, so thank you. And yeah, I want to invite the audience to continue posing their questions. I also have a couple of more questions to Christa. However, we want to listen to all the inputs of the speakers first before I pose the questions. Okay, so Mr. Singh, we still can't hear you. Okay, so as we are still not able to hear you, we will continue with Mr. Giga. He's our third speaker and try to speak to you later again. Okay, so Andreas Giga is the head of the expert forum, City of Tomorrow, and he's also part of the Emscher Genossenschaft Public Utility. Welcome, Mr. Giga. So, Mr. Giga, why is the Emscher Genossenschaft not a blue community yet? And yeah, feel free to start your presentation, of course. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome from Essen.
You may know this this little graph on the side of the slide. You see different colored stripes that reflect the temperatures across a certain period of time in our region, and this is just to tell us, or to point out again how urgent it is that we take action in terms of adapting to the impacts of climate change and mitigating climate change. Now, I was wondering, is what we're doing a mission impossible or not? Yes or not? Sometimes I feel like I'm in a movie when I think about what is happening. These are very complex issues. Trying to transform an entire region to implement a blue-green infrastructure in terms of urban planning. So I prepared a little presentation on this, and we're going to look at 2 or 3 issues that we are working on. Again, my name is Andreas Giga. I have been working as a head of the service organization for the expert forum that is called Water for the City, for the Cities of Tomorrow. And this is part of a network of communities that has founded the Emscher Genossenschaft, the public utility company Emscher Genossenschaft and Lippeverband. These are 2 rivers, and the communities are in the catchment areas of those 2 rivers, the Emscher and the Lippe. And thank you for that support, Samuel, for helping me out. So who are the big players? It is, of course, funding, money, the people, and also the projects, because we are trying to make our metropolitan region more climate resilient. So in terms of the measures, what do we have to do? There's nothing new. We've talked about this in the past years a lot. We've exchanged experiences and knowledge and expertise. For example, greening our facades. We create more surface where rainwater can actually be drained and be infiltrated in those sealed areas, and other measures as well. To look at the city as a sponge, but also to use evaporation to decrease temperatures, for example, that are on the rise due to climate change, of course, and to global warming. Again, another factor is funding. We cannot do anything without funding. And when you talk to municipalities, you often hear that there's enough money to go around. Nobody is complaining, but it is still an issue. At the end of 2020, in North Rhine-Westphalia, in our state here, we have about 100 funding programs in the area of water management, from digitalization to measures to networking, climate protection managers, and so on. So these are some of the projects that are funded in our state, in our Bundesland. But what are the challenges to get there? How do we get there? First of all, we have a variety of different programs. Sometimes we have to be very quick, first come, first serve, basically. Then we have tiered processes. You have to hand in an outline, and then there's a jury that decides on the projects that will be funded. And sometimes these juries are not very transparent. Also, in terms of equity of the municipalities, they have to partly use their own funds and money that they have. Sometimes, there's these projects are limited in terms of time, and there's also the principle of subsidiarity in urban development. So you have to use different funding opportunities as well to promote your projects, and you have all the regulations that apply to grants and credits and loans and financial assistance. And another factor, of course, are people. So you can have very good planning, but when people come into play, it's another issue, or you may run into issues. So we have our mindsets, we have our conditioning, we have certain goals. The question is whether or not we have shared goals or not. Sometimes we see very behavior that is adapted to the system, that is basically display a conformity to the system, and also in terms of values. It's a question of values if we want to transform an entire region. So we always ask, we're always wondering, is it a mission impossible to implement such an endeavor? We are on our way to do this, however, in our region. And I'm going to show you a couple of slides that demonstrate that. The Expert Forum Water in the Cities of Tomorrow is a network forum across different cities and across different municipal departments. And we want to promote the region as a driver for this blue-green transformation. That is our mission. One of our goals is to become a region, a climate resilient region, as an international example. So we want to make leaps in the area of adaptation to the impacts of climate change. And we have an operative business as well, a lot of actors from the administration, from the various institutions that are a part of our associations, and also with the heads of municipal departments and so on. We are also engaged in joint political activity. We are currently have the goal we want to create more open surfaces for rainwater infiltration in the sealed areas of our region to make sure that water can actually infiltrate into the ground again. And we want to increase that surface by 25% until 2040. But it's also about water supply, increasing green infrastructures. This is what we're working on. We want to increase also the evaporation rate, and we have a couple of other criteria. And we now are funded to the tune of 250 million until 2030, but this is for the entire Ruhr region. That includes our two public utilities and other public associations as well. The Expert Forum Zukunftsinitiative has been in existence since 2016. And we are working together with the 16 communities that are in the catchment areas of these two rivers, Emscher and Lippe, to implement the projects that are run in this region. Of course, we started out with talking to each other, with networking. We coordinated our activities. How do we want to work together? What are our shared interests that we can work on together? What can be our individual contributions? How do we want to work together in within what framework? We then developed products and approaches together. But it is always about contributing to the greater good of the entire region. That is our overall goal. So we, by virtue of networking and collaborating, we want to work across different municipal departments and cities as well. This is something that you cannot impose. It's a bottom-up principle that also is legitimized with a top-down aspect as well. So this is we call this a so-called counter-current principle, and what we want to roll out in the region. Of course, if we're working with people and their conditioning and the entrenched hierarchies that we are exposed to, and we see this with the topic of vaccinations as well. Sometimes it's difficult to make things happen, in particular with more complex issues and integral projects where various departments and various people are involved. So it requires the expertise and also the cooperation. We cannot remain confined to our individual responsibilities. We have to think in terms of what can be my contribution to the greater good. So there are two systems that we're working with: the classical model that we're trying to get away from, move away from. We try to come up together with solutions that we try to feed back into our system to finally implement them in our projects. So this is one of the expert fora where a lot of people meet, not only to get information, to learn something, but to work together. So we have various working groups where people can raise their issues. They can start talking about their problems. Maybe others have experience or have already found solutions for those problems. And we have all those various working systems where we basically cross-fertilize our cooperation. So we it's a mutual cooperation. It's a cooperation among all of us where we try to pool our expertise and our experiences. We also have a meeting of the heads of municipal departments. And this has become a very popular meeting because this bilateral, this mutual exchange of expertise and this building trust is very important for the entire process. You see also here a picture of a city forum. So you have core groups and various organizational units at the city level as well, where we bring together actors and activate them and have them commit to our work, which is nothing mandatory, but we actually can encourage them to get actively involved. We also have another forum that is the expert networks, where people from different areas come together, and for them it's important to actually come up with solutions, to take action and not only to talk. So we have different formats for these expert networks, and they actually make up a wonderful collaborative network that cannot be controlled, but which simply emerges through our work and which is the groundwork for these integral projects, so that we do not fail just by maybe giving up or because we run into problems that we have never dealt with before. So it's a shared effort. It's a communal effort. We also have the city coordinators that meet regularly. They are also actors that play a pivotal role. And they have taken it upon themselves to be a part of this as well. Right now, due to COVID-19, we are meeting online as well. But you see an agenda here, and we have various members: Thomas Kufen, Uli Petzel, and others, heads of departments, municipal departments, and so on, are part of this. And we are talking about, okay, what are the issues, the current issues? What does work, and who has what responsibilities and is in charge of what? So we try to pool these activities to make something greater happen, and this is how we actually can be successful with our mission that might seem impossible initially. So we applied for funding for 50 projects, and at the end of last year and this year, we actually started some of those projects, and we will, starting this year, starting very soon, we will have 25 million for each project period available for these projects. We also have a service organization for the public utility Emscher Genossenschaft. The initiatives come out of the municipalities, right? And this is these activities are a joint effort of the municipalities, and the service organization of that expert forum. We are trying to offer formats for them. We act as mediators, we act as counselors, and we act as service providers. We are a great team as well. And there are various organizational structures and work structures. There's no hierarchy. It's a very agile work environment, and we're very flexible and very quick compared to other working systems and groups. Looking at this entire picture, this is just a snapshot, and you see these various bubbles that are involved here. It's a huge network, as you can see, where every node is working to establish a climate resilient region as an international example. I'm looking forward how this will play out in the coming years, and who will be an active part of this to put this into practice. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Mr. Giga. We don't have an applause at the moment, but thank you very much for these very interesting insights. It was interesting to hear about your concrete perspective, what you were doing, but you didn't respond to my initial question, whether you're thinking about becoming a member of the Blue communities. Is that something that you've thought about? Well, this is an approach that we have not looked at yet. It's the first time I hear about this. I'm hearing about this for the first time. Maybe we can, we'll get back to you about this, and maybe we can also convey this to our members, and maybe they're interested as well. We have a couple of questions from the chat. Unfortunately, the connection to Dr. Singh seems to be really poor, but those who are working at an international level, please join us here, and maybe we can hear you from your perspectives and your experiences with the communities, because we might not be able to hear Dr. Singh. And one question is, why were you so successful in your region? You talked a lot about cooperation from networking. You talked about funding as well. Is that the key issue, or is it basically your region, the Ruhr region, the people in the region that make this work or not? I would be interested in hearing this as well. Well, there's a pressing need to take action. So there's a high population density. Most of the surfaces are sealed. So the issues regarding climate change become more and more exacerbated and pressing. When you look at the history, industrialization, moving away from industrialization, and now a new transformation, and we see that we can only make this work together. We can only make this transformation happen together. And there's a common spirit that is the driver for our actions. It's not only the public utility, but also the municipalities. They take initiative. You are a municipal water utility. We have a problem. Maybe you can help us in overcoming that problem, for example, with our project. But this is a mindset. This is also a culture that is growing, but it is driven by the pressing need, the urgent need to do something, but also the vision to actually transform our region, to make this transformation happen. I think many people are upset because there's a lot of talking, but no action is taken. And this is what we feel here, that people want to take action and are actually taking action. Thank you very much. Before we open this up to all of you for a bigger discussion, a larger discussion, and we hear more from Andreas and the others as well. And there was a Rainer from Austria, you wanted to come in. Yes, I wanted to speak to international issues. So maybe I can do that later. Well, maybe we can do that now, because the connection to Mr. Singh seems to be really poor. So maybe we can hear you to also look at the international perspective.
Do you want me to speak in English or German? You can speak in German because we have interpreters. So I'm not exactly an expert on water issues. However, I have some experiences in this field. And I wanted to ask a question. What is the context of this event? I thought the focus was on countries of the global south. However, it seems like apparently it's not. I ask this question because I think that the frame conditions that were mentioned in the presentation about the blue communities, I think it works really well in regions where you have public utilities that really work well. However, I think this is not the case in other countries, especially those of the global south. That's why I always say, let's do what works. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your comment and also on your question. The idea of this event was to also talk about the global perspective that was supposed to be Mr. Singh's part. So maybe Ms. Hecht can tell us more about that. Tell us if the concept of the blue community is also applicable in countries of the global south. So yeah, maybe Christa, maybe you can try to answer this question. Is the concept applicable to countries of the global south or not? Yes, sure. I'm going to try to answer the question. So our funding is from the so-called development aid, and Germany is one of the biggest donors when it comes to these type of programs. However, Blue Community has a different approach. And that's also why I can tell you, Rainer, it is about developing projects on the basis of corporations. So we have a municipal initiative that says that they want to take a certain action. For example, in Senegal, we have a private initiative that has been active for a lot of years. And they would fit the idea and the concept of the blue community. And there's also other initiatives that do projects in Brazil. So the idea matches the concept of the blue community. Basically, there are no strict rules regarding what the communities themselves or the municipalities themselves want to implement. It's free to it's really their decision which kind of project they want to implement. And of course, they have to fit to the countries. It's not about implementing really big and expensive projects. It's really about what they need and what their ideas are. So funding is a really important matter. So far, so good. Okay, so we had another question, which was about the privatization. I don't know if it was also your question, Rainer. So the question was whether or not the World Bank and privatization, or which relation exists between the World Bank and private investments and the concept and idea of these blue communities. So Mr. Giga, you also collaborate internationally, so maybe you can also share some of your experiences. So my name is Rainer Wojtek. I don't work for the World Bank anymore. However, I think that World Bank is not equivalent to privatization. I'm just thinking about Harare they had a water connectivity of 98%. And I think that the city was really a good role model for other cities in the global south. I don't think that we have to demonize privatizations. I don't think that it's a good idea to exclude privatizations, especially when it comes to establishing projects related to water resource management. Mr. Giga, do you want to comment on this? Mr. Gaviria? Okay, so I'm originally from Latin America, and I'm a water ecologist. And I have worked for the public utilities in the city of Bogota for many years. So the water supply in Bogota was really good. It's a really big city. So water supply is good. However, the problem was that water was redirected from the Uniloco. And as the water supply was so good, a lot of people migrated to the city. And yeah, I just wanted to comment on this. Okay, a comment from the interpreter. The internet connection is a little bit low. Ms. Hecht, do you want to comment on the topic of privatization? Yeah, I can comment on this topic. So our experience is that the World Bank has funded private projects and privatizations for many years. Every time when it was about countries that had difficulties with their public funds, there was always one concept: privatizing public services. There are several books who did research on this topic. So recently there was a small change in the World Bank. I observed this, or I was able to observe this during the last years. However, it is still very popular to fund privatization, and I think it's problematic because it makes services and also makes water more expensive, especially in certain states and countries. So water that is necessary for everyday life becomes very expensive. Water that you need for production and many other causes is getting more expensive. And especially right now, in the light of the pandemic, we can see that the recommendations, such as washing your hands on a regular basis, cannot be put into practice if there is not enough water. And in these cases, I can say that it is important that such institutions as the World Bank and also the EU Commission all really change their attitudes and fund a public water management, because I think in that way a lot of problems could be solved in a much better way. Thank you, Christa. Okay, let's switch from the World Bank to another topic. There were a couple of questions directed to Mr. Giga. Mr. Giga, there are questions such as, who is the main driver behind your initiative? Does the private economy also play a role in your work and the work of the public utility? So your public utility is really complex. Is that a problem sometimes, or do you feel like your workflow is still good and manageable? So yeah, of course, the structure is really complex, the structure of our association of our public utility. It becomes a little bit theoretic right now. So imagine a body. The body or your head doesn't have to communicate with your heart and tell the heart to breathe or to tell the lung to pump air. So this is kind of the theory behind it. So the idea that I mentioned in the beginning, this political idea and really this mindset that we have is really important. And I think it's good for all sorts of people to get involved, because there are a lot of smart people who work for us. There are a lot of smart people in public institutions. There are thousands of people who actually work in public institutions. And if each and every one of these persons give a little bit of their inputs, this can really create a really good dynamics, and it can act as a driver for this whole project. So I just talked about our memorandum and also our commitment to apply these regulations and take concrete measures. And this memorandum is really the basis of all our actions. However, we have other stakeholders who are getting involved, for example, universities. And they work together with us when it comes to the exchange and transfer of knowledge. And they can do research on the effects of our work. You see that there are a lot of different questions and perspectives that we could talk about. I think it's really the mindset of all the people who are involved who really act as a driver. And it's really about this exchange between colleagues, this personal contact. We have different guidelines for urban development. We have different guidelines, for example, for greening cities. And all of these documents, all of these results that we have in our different working groups are also published so that everyone can have access to it. We also do this in order to professionalize ourselves, because much of our work has been kind of invisible in the past. And right now we want to take a further step and really make our work more visible and therefore more accessible. And we don't know what will be in half a year or in 1 year. And yeah, we have to really stay flexible when it comes to the future. And that's why we also have many different networks and different working groups, so that we can cover a broad range of topics. And we also have tasks within our utility where we have to have follow a strict plan, a strict procedure. However, there are other departments, other working groups where there's a lot of space for exploring new paths, and also, kind of collect different ideas and different perspectives. So we also have to take into account the legal guidelines, fundings, questions revolving around fundings. There is really a lot of need, a pressing need to act and take action. And we don't want to be another stakeholder who just talks but doesn't take any concrete measures. Okay, so let's talk about public wells, public water dispensers. Public dispensers are a good way to bring the topic of water as a human right closer to the citizens. So I think they have really a high impact, but also a huge importance on the public and on citizens. Do you also plan on implementing more wells? Do you have guidelines concerning this topic? Okay, so this is a topic that we haven't worked a lot on. We work a lot on biodiversity, on urban development. However, this is a topic that we haven't worked much on. So I can just tell you a few things. When I was still working for the city of Essen, I remember that we talked about wells. However, the question revolved around the funding of wells, and they were really looking for reasons why we shouldn't build wells, because they were talking about the costs and expensive. The questions were, what do we do if people destroy these wells? So you could really see that it went into the other direction. What the focus was on is making it possible for water to seep into the ground more rapidly. This was kind of the focus when I was still working for the city of Essen. However, I experienced that the mindset was different, and the focus wasn't on wells and their effect on citizens, positive effect that they could have. Okay, so the key word is conflicts here. So you described that different municipalities work together. However, are there conflicts between these communities? Or are you normally on the same page when it comes to implementing concrete measures? Of course, we have conflict of interests. And a huge problem is, for example, accessibility. So it's not right to imagine that we...
Genau, danke. Der einfach dahin führen soll. Und jetzt sind wir bei dem Punkt, es sind oft, also wenn ich dann wenn ich in Gesprächen bin und so wie jetzt auch, dass man mich fragt, hör mal, wie macht ihr das denn oder wie kann das gelingen, dann ist das nichts Spektakuläres. Also das ist nicht so, dass ich sage, jetzt breite ich mal die Theorie hier aus und dann zeige ich mal, was die Strategie dahinter ist, sondern es sind oft die einfachen Formate, die wir verlernt haben. Ich sage mal zum Beispiel in den Dialog zu gehen, Sie, Herr Samuel, mal zu fragen, was ist denn für Sie eine klimaresiliente Region? Wie soll unsere Region in 20 Jahren aussehen? So, und dann teilen Sie das Bild mit mir, dann teile ich mein Bild. Und plötzlich haben wir vielleicht ein gemeinsames Bild oder sagen, wissen Sie was, wir kümmern uns jetzt um die Trinkwasserbrunnen in den Innenstädten.
Ich werde immer...
Alles klar. Ann, ich hab dich manchmal stumm geschaltet, weil du hier in den normalen reingesprochen hattest. Deshalb gab es da eine kleine Überschneidung. Aber ich glaube, jetzt klappt's. Okay, genau, aber finde ich auch richtig. Also gerne Visionen teilen. Ja. Das macht ja auch immer Sinn, Herr Giger, dass man da sich austauschen kann.
Okay, thank you. So I saw a couple of comments. We talked about privatization as well, and the human right to water. And Gertrud Falk had a question regarding the human right to water. Do you want to speak to that, Andreas? the human right to water, the resolution that was adopted by the UN 10 years ago. Christa, do you want to speak to that? Yes, I can do that. Well, let me start with Germany. In Germany, it is different from the US case, where people get their water cut off in the US. The public utilities are obliged to do that if people don't pay their water or their wastewater treatment, to take certain steps. And with those households with little means, with little financial means, this will be covered basically by the institutions. So there are solutions if people cannot pay their water bills or wastewater bills. But if you have landlords that do not pay their bills, then this is another issue, and there may be some legal consequence, but often this is dealt with, and this is resolved at the administrative level. In other countries, it is a different picture. In the US, for example, or also in France. In France, the utilities cannot and companies cannot cut off water supply to people, even if people cannot pay their bills or do not pay their bills. So we have different scenarios internationally. Also, the regulation, the water regulation that are behind water supply, water provision, and the access to water. We have a debate around water among many NGOs, because we learned that last year that there was a first time that futures were issued for water rights out of San Francisco. This is where it happened for the first time last year. So people can now basically trade in water rights. In Germany, that is not possible, because water is a commons due to the water law in Germany. We are only allowed to use the water, to utilize the water, and all water utilities have to, and all service providers have to apply for the use and utilization of those waters, including the water industry, and they have to get this approved. They have to be authorized, basically. So there's another principle operating in the background that we have in our water law, because water is first and foremost for the purpose of local use, and which requires the municipalities and the utilities to make sure that they do not overuse and overexploit the water. And here it is important that they only use as much water as can be restored in the water cycle in the natural way. This is an important issue also with regard to the application of some water industry players to use groundwater resources. So in that case, they have to make sure that public water supply, public water provision is not damaged through that. And for example, we have the case where people do not have access to water any longer. That is a very important principle in Germany. We know from documentaries such as Bottled Life that it's a different case in other countries, sometimes a very different case. And there's a lot of competition among private corporations such as Nestle and public utilities. Nestle is bottling up water and trying to sell their water worldwide, and the public. So the competition between those two. In Germany, when the laws stay as is, we think that we can always win such struggles for the benefit of the public. But looking at those different cases or different state of affairs internationally, we see that we have to talk about how we want to manage water resources internationally without, telling states what kind of laws to adopt. But in the US, for example, and other countries, the water belongs to those who own the land. The groundwater belongs to those who own the land the water is on. In Germany, that's not the case. The water belongs to everyone. It's a commons. I see another raised hand. Do you want to share something? Do you want to contribute something? Or sorry, I didn't get the name. If you want to say something, please switch on your mic as well. Okay, you didn't want to come in. So thank you. I collected a couple of more questions that are a bit more technical. And maybe Andreas Giga, you can respond to some of those questions. I don't know how much you are involved on the technical side as well. For example, the internal water cycle and resource cycle. For example, the feeding back of fresh water and phosphates, and also the mixed water sewage system, the separation of different waters. Does it make sense? Maybe you can tell us something from your experience. If it's too technical, we can also skip it, but maybe you can address those questions that you feel fit to address. Thank you. Well, these are a couple of aspects that you mentioned. The various we cannot just discharge any wastewater anywhere. We have to treat it first. And the various Bundesländer, they have the authority on their wastewater treatment systems. And when we had the audits and also the maintenance of these in these wastewater facilities, it's quite impressive to see how much is filtered out, how much particles are filtered out to make sure that we discharge only clean water into the water cycle again, so that we treat the wastewater adequately. So these are issues that we take into consideration, but in our projects, but in the various measures that we implement, those aspects only, however, play a minor role in our measures. In our region, the Ruhr region, I said there's an urgency to take action. We have mixed water sewage systems in 80% of the municipalities. When it rains, we have high volumes of water that cannot be managed by our systems. And that is one problem that we have currently. At the same time, our surfaces are mostly sealed, so there cannot be groundwater recharge cannot take place because the water cannot seep into the ground again. So we now take water from dams. But again, we have to make sure that we have adequate water discharge and wastewater discharge. Sometimes we have an excessive water runoff also from the wastewater treatment facilities. So the image that we're trying to use that reflects what we're trying to do is using the city as a sponge, right? And this is what we jointly work on as a public utility and as a network of municipalities. Thank you very much, Andreas Giga. Christa, back to you. Also picking up on what Andreas Giga said, maybe Andreas Giga can encourage the municipalities to become a member of the blue communities as well, to become blue communities. And if so, how does it work? And the principles of the blue communities, how do you make sure that that actually your members stick to those principles and actually comply with those principles? And what is necessary to become a member? Well, we're looking for municipalities. I know that the Emscher Genossenschaft, that public utility association, has already discussed becoming a member, but they haven't formally applied yet. And we coordinate with the Council of Canadians when we get an application. Municipalities, universities, churches are already members. They're blue community members. A private company, can they become members as well? That was a question that was raised as well, or is often raised. And well, we and the Council of Canadians are a bit hesitant and reluctant to make private corporations members, because we might get an application from Veolia because we want to, they might say, we want to sell as much water as possible, bottled water as possible. That would be not in our interest to do that. We invite municipalities to join us, or churches that work on a nonprofit basis, and municipalities that manage their water in a public and democratic way. Other actors may also want to join us because they support our principles. But in that case, I would prefer a case, for example, that they become ambassadors for blue communities. Maud Barlow, that was the advice, or that was what Maud Barlow recommended. Of course, it's important to commit to the 4 principles and to implement those 4 principles as well. And based on that, the municipalities can do a lot. We do not have a complicated audit system that has to be checked again and again. That would be too costly and would use too much energy, basically, and would cause a lot of red tape instead of putting all our efforts into implementing our principles. This is what we prefer. And when it comes to the municipalities, we like to see that there are initiatives within those municipalities that try to implement and put into practice our principles. If that's the case, we don't need audits, I think. And then we can rely on those initiatives to make sure that the principles are being implemented. This is what we are seeing currently happening in the blue communities that we currently have. So it's a process among the actors that are involved and those in charge in the municipalities. Thank you, Christa, for that input. Our discussion slowly draws to a close. We have not. We still have more. We would have more to discuss on the issue of private versus public investment. Mr. Stepke, would you had a comment? Well, it only makes sense that private companies take on part of the responsibilities and tasks, and it's always necessary to have democratic control over water and wastewater treatment in any case. Two more things that I'm taking away. First of all, we have the blue communities approach, the principles that can be put into practice. That is one possible starting point. We also have the idea of creating a network or expanding the network and having a global international partnership at the international level, but also at the local level, the municipal level, where people come together, municipalities come together, and through that great network, we can bring about the blue-green transformation, the great transformation that you mentioned to promote climate resilience of cities. Unfortunately, we were not able to hear Dr. Singh's perspective today, so we focused more on Germany, and hopefully we'll be able to hear from him later on. Maybe we have some resources that we can make available to all of you. But for now, thank you, Andreas Giger. Thank you, Christa Hecht, for your time. Thank you to all of the participants for listening, and thank you for your contributions. We have a new seminar coming up on the issue of hydropower on the 11th, and on the 18th of March, the role of Germany in implementing the right to access to water globally. So please join us for those seminars as well. We will be able to send around your presentations, Christa's presentation and also Andreas' presentation. Thank you for that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your contributions. Thank you for bearing with us. We had a couple of technical glitches, but I think the discussion was interesting nevertheless. Stay healthy and take care. Thank you.